In 2045, Kurum Corporation, led by the brilliant Lee Sane, launched a hyper-realistic virtual game called RE. It quickly gained massive popularity, amassing over 1 billion players. To challenge the users, the company introduced a special event. Players had to destroy a specific wooden doll in just 10 strikes to earn a high-value game capsule worth 50 million, along with 5 bonus points to all stats. Despite being active for over a year, no one had managed to complete the event. Even the customer care team was worried about potential complaints, accusing the game of setting an impossible task. The relations officer was on the verge of resigning when an unknown player, the main character, decided to take on the challenge. At first, no one paid him any attention, but when he drew his sword and delivered a single critical hit that split the wooden doll in half, the room went silent. He had become the first person ever to clear the event. The team leader immediately ordered a background check and discovered that the sword he used was merely an epic weapon, nothing extraordinary. This only intensified their curiosity. How could someone defeat the doll so easily with an ordinary epic weapon? Earlier, Kim Hae-nu had woken from a vivid dream where he failed to save his father from a fire. Later, he met his friend Kim Jun in the hospital lobby. Hae-nu wore a hat and a face mask to conceal his appearance. Jun teased him about his looks, prompting Hae-nu to angrily remove the mask and reveal his burned scars. Jun suggested moving on to the real reason for the meeting, asking if Hae-nu knew about the game RE. Hae-nu admitted he had no idea. Jun quickly gave him a summary of the game and explained the beginner-only event. He emphasized that no one, including the top players, had succeeded in clearing it. He described the rewards and suggested they try the challenge together. Hae-nu was surprised. Millions had already failed. Jun admitted it would be difficult, but insisted it wasn't impossible. He believed Hae-nu's help could make the difference. To clarify, Jun showed Hae-nu the 10 million capsule he had purchased for the attempt. Hae-nu was stunned at the cost and struggled to believe that a single game capsule could be that expensive. Jun explained that it was worth it, noting that success could bring incredible rewards. He added that real-world currency was being traded within the game, which explained its enormous user base. Hae-nu remained hesitant. Jun urged him to start the game, but Hae-nu questioned where the capsule came from. Jun dismissed the question, emphasizing the potential rewards instead. Hae-nu stayed doubtful, noting there were no guarantees. Jun assured him it was an investment and that Hae-nu's participation would increase their chances of success. Jun then explained that RE had a blacksmith class, which was perfect for Hae-nu, being the only son of a renowned blacksmith. Hae-nu finally understood what Jun had been hinting at. He removed his cap to show the scars from his accident, explaining that he wasn't in any condition to attempt the challenge. His injuries came from a workshop fire involving his father. Though he managed to save him, Hae-nu suffered severe burns and lost consciousness. To cover medical costs, he had been forced to take on menial jobs. One day, while working, his supervisor asked him to use a hammer to drive a nail. Hyansu had always been skilled with a hammer, having practiced for over 10 years. But on that particular day, he noticed that he could no longer control his strength in his right arm. Without the power he once relied on, he felt incapable of performing anything related to blacksmithing. He told his friend that he was only trying to help and reassured him that he would be fine. Turning to leave, Hae-nu urged Jian to keep the game capsule safe and not waste the 10 million investment. Just as he reached the door, Jian called him a real idiot. He reminded Hae-nu that he was pushing himself to the limit just to cover his father's medical bills, and that the work he was doing wasn't sustainable. Jian insisted that the game had the potential to pay for all the treatments and restore him fully. Using reverse psychology, Jian reminded him that he was never a quitter and that all he needed to do was listen to him. He promised that Hae-nu could try the game once and quit if he didn't like it. Hae-nu didn't respond, simply walking out. While working, Hae-nu couldn't stop thinking about what Jian had said. It lingered in his mind, but he tried to push it aside to focus on earning money for his father. Then, the sound of metal striking metal reached his ears, sparking memories of everything he had missed. Curiosity took over, and he decided to check out the game. Driven by a desire to reclaim what he had lost, he approached the game capsule and entered it. He found himself in the character creation area. When prompted for a nickname, he entered his real name. The system began forming his character according to his body type. Hyena was surprised to see that the character appeared perfect, without a single blemish. After confirming the character, he was struck by the return of strength in his right hand and allowed himself a small smile, silently acknowledging the debt he owed Giant. The game then placed him in a random beginner area, the banned territory. As he explored, he came across Ren's smithy. Inside, a blacksmith was pounding a sword with force. Hyanu immediately spoke up, pointing out that the blacksmith was working incorrectly. The man was taken aback and asked him to clarify. Hyanu repeated his warning, explaining that the method being used would not yield a strong sword. Although the blacksmith was initially irritated at an outsider questioning his work, he handed Hyanu the mallet and told him to forge the sword himself, promising to watch. Hyanu had initially sought to gain favor to use the forge, but now he saw a better opportunity. He agreed to forge the sword under one condition. He would keep whatever he made, and in exchange, he would teach the blacksmith the correct method. The blacksmith, astonished by his confidence, agreed but warned of consequences if Hyanu failed. Without hesitation, Hyanu accepted. Standing at the forge, Hyanu realized it had been 3 years since he last worked in this way. Still, he trusted his skills. He lifted the hammer and began striking the metal. With each hit, his dormant instincts started returning. Hyanu felt alive again, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. He continued hammering with excitement, fully immersed in the process. The blacksmith observed, skeptical at first, but as he watched Hyanu's movements, he began to notice the precision and experience behind them. Even though Hyanu wasn't formally trained as a professional, he could see the joy and mastery in his work. Then, Hyanu executed a professional technique, folding, reattaching, and refining the steel to remove impurities. The blacksmith was stunned. He had never thought to use such a simple yet effective method. Still doubtful, the blacksmith applied his appraisal skill. His surprise grew as he realized that the steel had improved from D grade to C grade in a short time. He was amazed. He had forged C grade steel before, but never had he witnessed such a significant improvement so quickly. The blacksmith finally began to realize that Hyanu might not be exaggerating about his talent. Still, he convinced himself that he had reached his own limits. There was no way anyone could surpass what he had just witnessed. He clung to the belief that Hyanu couldn't be better than him in the art of blacksmithing. Exhausted, the blacksmith eventually fell asleep, only to wake at daybreak and find Hyanu still at the forge. Throughout the night, Hyanu had continued pounding the steel with the same precise method. When the blacksmith used his appraisal skill, he was stunned. The steel had upgraded to B grade. He couldn't believe that Hyanu had achieved such a feat and noticed that Hyanu wasn't slowing down. At one point, as fatigue began to set in and Hyanu was about to drop the sword, the blacksmith took it from him and asked how he could help. Hyanu smiled at the offer and thanked him, and together they resumed work. The blacksmith brought out his notebook and began taking notes and providing instructions. Soon, Hyanu managed to push the steel to A grade. The blacksmith had to openly admit that Hyanu was exceptional. He had never seen a rare grade item appear in the beginner zone. This meant Hyanu could forge a one-of-a-kind sword. But while the blacksmith was excited, Hyanu cautioned him not to celebrate just yet. The hilt was incomplete, and the blade still needed to reach peak sharpness. The blacksmith admitted that he had never met anyone like Hyanu, despite having hammered metal since childhood. Since Hyanu intended to keep the sword, the blacksmith suggested forging another one using rare material mithril. He revealed that the mithril was a family heirloom, passed down for generations. Hyanu asked why he would give him such precious material. The blacksmith explained that he had learned a lot from Hyanu and wanted to see what he could create. He also admitted he lacked the skill to forge mithril properly and wanted to witness Hyanu's craftsmanship. Hyanu was stunned. Mithril was thought to exist only in myths, but he embraced the opportunity. Though inexperienced with it, he was ready to take the risk. With the new material, he accepted that he would need to start over. The blacksmith, eager to join him, asked if he could assist, and Hyanu agreed, respecting the rare gift he had received. The blacksmith even suggested calling Hyanu master, but Hyanu politely declined due to their age difference. The two worked together for a month, after which Hyanu completed his desired sword. He then cleared the event, leaving the game management team with very little information about him. They couldn't learn more because he insisted on maintaining his privacy. The team continued to monitor him and discovered that he had entered the hunting training grounds. At the entrance, the instructor, Rel-sun, tried to discourage him, claiming he wasn't ready and suggesting he start with hunting a rabbit. Hyanu insisted he wanted to stay and assured Rel-sun he wouldn't waste time. When told to pick a sword, Hyanu coldly responded that he had brought his own, which he intended to use. Over the past month, he had stayed in the beginner zone to acquire extraordinary skills, culminating in the zone's only epic-grade sword despite still being level 1. The game's creator, upon hearing this, suggested letting Hyanu continue to see how far he could go. Rel-sun, the hunting grounds instructor, couldn't believe a level 1 player was insisting on using his own sword. He mocked Hyanu for trying to be a blacksmith in the game, reminding him that the hunting ground were filled with dangerous monsters and that trained swordsmen far outmatched anyone wielding basic equipment. Rel-sun's patience waned, and his attitude toward Hyanu soured. Hyanu, unfazed, told Rel-sun to put him through the most challenging course in the hunting grounds, stating he wanted to surpass the best swordsmen who had come before. This only fueled Rel-sun's frustration, and he decided to teach Hyanu a lesson. Leading him to a goblin's cage, he asked if he was sure he wanted to take on the trial. Hyanu confidently answered yes. Rel-sun angrily warned Hyanu that if he failed the trial, he would be barred from entering the hunting grounds for a week. Unfazed, Hyanu teased the instructor, asking if the third stage was all there was, since he intended to clear every stage at once. The remark nearly pushed Rel-sun over the edge. Without hesitation, he angrily opened the cage to the 4th stage, where a level 15 mad goblin awaited. Very few people ever reached this stage, and none had ever survived it. Hyanu found himself facing the terrifying goblins, yet he remained calm. He waited, carefully timing his strikes, and, as the leaping goblin approached, a single confident strike took it down. He quickly dealt with one of the swift goblins, but another landed a critical blow to his stomach. Hyanu fell to his knees in pain, and the instructor, expecting to gloat, prepared to say, "I told you so." To his surprise, Hyanu endured the hit and the following pain. Over the past month, his endurance and stamina had improved significantly through forging his sword, though his agility still needed work. While recovering, a mad goblin charged at him, wielding its weapon with terrifying force. At the same time, a status effect hit Hyanu, causing dizziness and reducing his vision. Rel-sun watched, impressed that Hyanu had withstood so much, yet he still believed this would be the end. Now, facing 2 goblins simultaneously, Hyanu didn't panic. Instead, he focused completely on his weapon, trusting the sword he had personally forged. As the goblins attacked, he struck them down with precision, leaving everyone watching, including the creator, the management team, and Rel-sun in total disbelief. Rel-sun's mood brightened when he realized Hyanu possessed something no one else had. He assumed Hyanu must have learned swordsmanship somewhere, but Hyanu explained that he had only been taught that a blacksmith should be able to handle the weapons he makes. At that moment, Rel-sun understood the true skill of a blacksmith, and observing the scars and wounds on Hyanu's arms, he recognized that Hyanu was no pushover. Rel-sun immediately apologized for his earlier behavior, and his affinity for Hyanu reached its maximum. Then, Rel-sun made a surprising offer. He asked if Hyanu was willing to become the Mad Lord, a legendary class. The management team almost lost their minds. The Mad Lord was a prestigious role, surpassing even the epic class Mad Knight, leading hundreds of Mad Knights and serving as the protector of the game world. Rel-sun eagerly awaited Hyanu's response. Surprisingly, Hyanu declined, stating that he was a blacksmith, not a knight. Those watching smiled at his answer, and even Rel-sun respected his decision. Hyanu had thought his life as a blacksmith was over, but the game had changed that. Rel-sun handed him a letter of recommendation, directing him to the Lord's castle, where someone important awaited. As a reward for clearing the 4th stage, Hyanu received the rusty old armor of the former Mad Lord. Though worn, Rel-sun believed Hyanu could restore it to its former glory and encouraged him to continue tackling impossible feats, emphasizing that he was the only one capable. The management team was relieved that Hyanu had preserved his potential. They noted that a god of blacksmiths class existed, representing the ultimate peak for blacksmiths, and they were glad Hyanu was still on the path to reach it. After completing the training ground, Hyanu was finally sent into the village to begin his real journey in the game. However, before reaching the main stage, he logged out to attend to responsibilities in real life. Hyansu felt a mix of relief and concern. He was getting used to the game, but his account balance was steadily dropping. He knew he had to cover both his father's hospital bills and their living expenses. Just then, he received a call from Giant, who asked if he had managed to clear the training ground. Giant explained that he had been too busy with work to log in recently. Hyanu confirmed that he had cleared the ground, received a quest, and had arrived at the territory village. Giant was pleased and suggested that Hyanu check out the auction house, a place where in-game essentials like gear and items were sold for gold. With a real money trading system, 10 gold equaled 10,000,001, and many players treated the auction house as a source of real income. Giant admitted that this was the main reason he brought Hyanu into the game. Since he had been playing for a while, Giant had never seen swords as impressive as those Hyanu and his father could create. Now that Hyanu had joined, they finally had a chance to sell the best swords on the market. Grateful, Hyanu thanked his friend. Hyanu sat down to eat a large meal, knowing he would need stamina to craft and sell items for gold. He then went for a jog, determined to do whatever it took to help his father wake from his condition. Later, he logged back into the game and accessed the auction shop. When prompted to enter a shop name, he called it Hyun's Forge. Suddenly, he found himself in a sky-bound space called the Forge of Power, and the system informed him that he could now access the auction board anytime, anywhere. Besides his main sword, Lightbringer, Hyanu only had a test sword from the forge. Browsing other test swords, he saw that they were all selling for at least 70 gold coins. Remembering Giant's advice not to undervalue his work, he set the price for his sword at 100 gold coins. He listed it under the name, Hyun's First Sword, and hoped for the best. Players quickly received notifications about the sword and were amazed that Hyanu had created such a weapon without being given one. The bids began to climb. At the Golden Shield Guild, news of the sword reached them along with the fact that it had an enhancement option. The Vice Master was initially unimpressed, believing that lower-tier materials could produce high enhancement rates and that Hyanu had simply saved costs. However, he admitted that naming the sword First Sword was a clever move. Realizing that their guild's standing could rise if they were first to purchase it, one member, Blam, acted immediately and bought the sword. Hyanu, worried it might be sold too quickly, was shocked when he received the notification confirming the sale. Checking the adventurer logs, he saw that it had sold for over 1,000 gold coins equivalent to 1,000,000 won in the real world. Overjoyed, Hyanu realized he might have finally hit the jackpot. The buyer was the Golden Shield Guild. Blam sent a message welcoming Hyanu and inviting him to visit anytime. They were interested in talents like his, offering either an exclusive sales contract or guild membership. As a blacksmithing guild with over 780,000 followers, they represented a massive opportunity. Giant had once explained that gaining followers in the game was even harder than leveling up, as more followers meant greater profit. Hyanu checked his own forge's followers and saw there were only 82. Despite receiving requests from other guilds, he decided it wasn't the right time to join one yet. He hadn't even demonstrated half of his skill. With his goals clear, Hyanu set his sights on the Lord's Manor to continue progressing in the game. Meanwhile, Lord Barnes was troubled as he tried to find a way to restore an important item. One of his subjects explained that only a capable restorer from the capital could handle the task. The problem was that restorers were a proud group who would never travel down to Ban, and Barnes himself was unwilling to leave his region for the capital. The item in question was a priceless bow left behind by his late father, a true family heirloom that meant more to him than anything else. Unbeknownst to Barnes, the man advising him Bell was actually a rogue player disguised as a blacksmith. For over a week, Bell had been working to gain Barnes's trust, and it was finally paying off. He offered to take the bow to the capital himself, assuring the Lord that it could be restored to perfection there. But just as Bell's plans seemed to succeed, Hyansu entered the room and interrupted, telling Barnes that the bow could be restored in the territory itself. Barnes was shocked to hear this, pointing out that the bow was already burnt and badly damaged. Curious about who Hyanu was, he asked his guards. They explained that Hyanu had come with a personal recommendation letter from Relson. Barnes was stunned Drelson had never recommended anyone before, and his interest in Hyanu grew. He asked Hyanu to state his experience and ability. Hyanu simply replied that he was still a level 1 player, and his class was listed as unemployed. Bell immediately jumped in, mocking him and calling him trash. He declared that the restoration skill could only be learned by blacksmiths at level 80 and shouted at Hyanu not to interfere in matters he had no business with. Hyanu calmly responded that Bell was mistaken about the type of bow. He explained that it was a horn bow, not a recurve bow. Bell was left confused, while Hyanu went on to explain further. Before he could finish, Barnes cut him off sharply, saying he had run out of patience with outsiders lecturing him about his family heirloom. Hyanu, however, pressed on. He pointed out that although the bow was gifted by an outsider, it had clearly been crafted within the territory. He mentioned seeing a buffalo drawing on the wall when entering the hall and explained that in his world, buffalo horns were known as special crafting materials. But something unusual stood out to him. The bow did not use the usual cow string. Instead, it was strung with whale sinew. Hyanu then turned to Barnes and asked him to explain why this was the case. Barnes confirmed it. He explained that the outsider who gave his father the bow had indeed been a close friend and also a blacksmith. The drawing Hyanu saw depicted a buffalo migration, and both the buffalo horns and whale strings were rare resources found within the territory's swamps and ports. His father's friend had crafted the bow using the rarest materials the land could provide. Barnes was deeply impressed that Hyanu could see through details that even a level 100 blacksmith had failed to recognize. Meanwhile, Bell was fuming, realizing that the Lord's trust was shifting toward Hyanu. Barnes praised Hyanu's insight and admitted that he had been searching for someone capable of ensuring the heirloom would not go to waste. Because of the way Hyanu had handled the situation, he entrusted him with the task of restoring the bow. As an added incentive, Barnes promised that if Hyanu succeeded, he would be rewarded with 500 gold. Barnes dismissed Bell, telling him he would call on him only when his services were required. Bell left, seething with rage and plotting revenge against Hyanu for ruining his plan. Once Bell was gone, Barnes turned to Hyanu, asking what needed to be done to restore the bow. Hyanu explained that buffalo horns and whale sinew were essential, along with oak, mulberry, bamboo, and proper tools. After listing the materials, he acquired the restoration method for the bow. The system warned him that if the restoration fell below 70%, the bow would be destroyed. As Hyanu touched the bow, memories of working with his father flooded back. Tears came to his eyes as the familiar, sweet recollections filled his mind. Even his game, Capsule, registered a 99.9% sync rate. Hyanu felt gratitude for being able to craft properly, thanks to the skills his father had taught him. Just as he was about to begin, Barnes entered the workshop, offering to assist him. The day passed with the two of them working tirelessly. Barnes felt his strength waning, but Hyanu moved energetically, fully immersed in the restoration. When Barnes suggested resting, Hyanu reminded him there was no time for breaks. The bow was a family heirloom, carrying the memories of Barnes's father. Barnes agreed, noting that Hyanu genuinely enjoyed working on the bow, which Hyanu confirmed, saying it held many precious memories for him. Days turned into weeks, and over 20 days later, they completed the restoration of the marksman's horn bow. The system displayed its stats, revealing that it had been refined beyond its original state. The bow, once again, was a gift from mysterious outsider to the Lord's family, and Barnes knew his father would be proud. Outside, Hyanu encouraged Barnes to test the bow. When fired, the bow released immense aura, obliterating the target. Barnes laughed and explained that it felt even stronger than before. With this, Hyanu completed the restoration quest with a result exceeding 100%, and his intimacy with Barnes reached its maximum. Relieved, Hyanu accepted Barnes's gratitude as the Lord could finally return to his duties. Barnes felt the promised 500 gold coins were insufficient and increased the reward to 2,000 gold coins, in addition to granting Hyanu free access to the forge. Hyanu was astonished, realizing the amount was substantial in real-world value. While celebrating, Barnes asked if he was interested in learning swordsmanship. Barnes revealed that before becoming Lord, he was a swordsman and had mastered a secret sword art that subdued endless monsters and stabilized the territory. Recognizing Hyanu's potential, both as a blacksmith and a swordsman, Barnes offered to teach him some of this knowledge. The system displayed the skill quest for Hyanu, the prime sword art, a Grey sword art, with 80% proficiency achievable through training. Barnes warned that the training would be intensive, similar to their work in the workshop. A month of rigorous practice followed. Hyanu crafted a Gakong for personal use, restored the Mad Monarch's rusted armor, and trained intensely alongside Barnes. He completed the prime sword art training, and Barnes asked if he was ready to leave. Hyanu confirmed, expressing gratitude for Barnes's guidance. When asked about his next plan, Hyanu revealed he intended to get a new job. Now equipped with a restored, shining Mad Lord's armor, Barnes assured him that he could return for help anytime. Hyanu took pride in the equipment he had crafted, knowing it would compensate for his low-level stats. To supplement his living expenses, he crafted rare-grade bows and listed them for sale on the auction house, naming the latest creation Hyanu's second bow. Hyanu wondered just how much his bow would sell for this time. Crafted from rare materials, it was likely a one-of-a-kind creation that might never appear again. The Golden Shield Guildmaster, Rune, soon learned of the bow and recognized the astonishing craftsmanship behind it. What amazed him even more was that Hyanu had forged such an incredible weapon using low-grade materials. There was a saying in the game that players often receive a befitting job, skill, or title, an acknowledgement of their talent by the game's AI. Rune concluded that Hyanu must be a legendary blacksmith, akin to the renowned #1 blacksmith Smith. When a final bid came in, the bow sold for over 2,000 gold coins, leaving Hyanu in shock. He could hardly believe players were willing to pay such an enormous sum for a single bow. Along with the sale, he had gained over 3,000 followers, and with them came hundreds of guild invitations and crafting requests, more than he could handle alone. Once he finished rounding up his sales, Hyanu prepared for his next journey, the Holy Land of Blacksmiths, known as the Tower of Blacksmiths. Upon arriving at the majestic tower, Hyanu was awestruck by its architecture. At the entrance, a giant sealed lock barred his way, leaving him to wonder how he could enter. The system informed him that he would need a sword forged in a magical forge to break the seal. Examining the lock, he realized it was made of igneous rock, and just as he pondered the location of the forge, he was suddenly teleported inside it. The system explained that he would receive full access to materials and tools with drastically reduced crafting time, though any sword he created in the forge could only be used for the test. Hyanu wondered what kind of test awaited him, whether it would measure his forging skills or something else entirely. Meanwhile, the tower's master, Deng, had long given up on finding anyone who loved blacksmithing for its own sake. He typically granted the blacksmith title to anyone who sought it, confident that no one could ever slice the sealing stone, a test of true skill. Hyanu decided on the sword he would craft, a Damascus sword, a weapon that only the highest-grade blacksmiths could create. With all materials at his disposal and reduced crafting time, he felt confident, remembering the lessons his father had taught him about the true strength a sword could hold. Excitement coursed through him as he prepared to craft the weapon the way he wanted, a freedom he had not experienced in a long time. Deng, dozing in the tower, was suddenly awakened by the vibrations of hammering echoing through the building. Shaken, he rushed to the window and witnessed the entrance lock being effortlessly cut in half. Realizing the god of blacksmiths had appeared, Deng hurried to the entrance as Hyanu entered. Hyanu, still nervous, asked if he had passed the test. Deng explained that the previous measurements had been based on the stone, but Hyanu's feet had sliced the stone in half, rendering conventional assessment impossible. Leading him to a summoning circle, Deng handed Hyanu a hammer. Confused, Hyanu took it, and the system informed him that he had received the Hammer of the Covenant, triggering an SS-grade quest. Deng then pushed him into the circle, revealing the true test. Hyanu found himself in a strange battlefield, faced with a horde of orcs charging toward him. Panic surged through him, realizing he had been assigned what seemed like a blacksmith quest with combat responsibilities. Behind him, 50 warriors awaited, believing him to be a reinforcement from Deng. The system explained that Hyena needed to earn 70 contributions alongside the 50 brave warriors to complete the test. Their leader, Hans, personally welcomed Hyanu, explaining that the orc invasion had recently become rampant and that they would need his support to succeed. Hans revealed that many of their weapons had been damaged in the battle against the orcs, and they needed Hyanu to help repair them with his skills. Hyanu immediately clarified that they were mistaken. He hadn't changed his class to blacksmith yet, so he couldn't use the skill. Hans, pointing to the hammer in Hyanu's hand, asked about it, and Hyanu nervously explained that he had received it during his advancement test. He emphasized that he had only been sent for an additional test, and it quickly became clear to Hans that Hyanu had no real battlefield experience. Hyanu admitted that his combat level was still at the beginner stage. Hans's expression darkened. They had expected someone useful, but instead, they now had a recruit who needed to be taught the basics. He instructed Hyanu to stay at the watchtower for safety until they returned from the battlefield. Suddenly, an axe flew toward Hans, and Hyanu reacted instinctively, slashing it down mid-air. Hans's eyes widened in shock and amazement. Hyanu admitted his inexperience, but requested to join the battle, and Hans reluctantly agreed. Following the unit, Hyanu hoped he could handle the orcs as he had the goblins. Hans ordered him to stick close to Ben's squad, promising to guide his movements. Soon, Hyanu faced the orcs head-on and noted immediately how much tougher they were compared to the goblins. Stepping into battle with unwavering conviction, he struck down the first orc in a single blow, faster than the eye could follow. From this, he gained 86 experience points, and a smile crossed his face. His month of training alongside Barnes had clearly paid off. He even leveled up despite still being jobless. Ben, witnessing this, recognized Hyanu's immense potential, but as he spoke to him, he lost focus, almost leaving himself vulnerable. Noticing this, Hyanu quickly switched from his sword to his bow, firing a precise arrow that impaled the orc threatening Ben. Before the enemy could react, another arrow smashed through a second orc's head. Hyanu leveled up again, but Ben was astounded not by the damage dealt, but by Hyanu's ability to take down a large orc with pinpoint accuracy. Hans shouted at Ben to pull back, warning that the orcs were converging on Hyanu's position. Realizing the danger was his fault, Ben panicked, fearing for Hyanu's life. But Hyanu calmly swapped back to his Lightbringer's sword, activating the flurry skill. A whirlwind of strikes cut through every enemy within a 10-meter radius. The sword's immense power decimated the orc ranks, and Hyanu's contribution reached 19%. Seeing Hyanu in action, Hans gained newfound confidence. With him on our side, we might actually win this battle, he shouted, boosting the squad's morale. Hyanu continued fighting, feeling more and more like part of the unit. When his contribution reached 20%, the system notified him that he was defeating orcs faster than anyone else, and that a previously locked chapter had been unlocked. Suddenly, a level 51 orc warrior appeared. Hans's expression tightened. This was an enemy they had never managed to defeat. Surrounded on all sides, Hans realized that their overzealous push had led them too deep into enemy territory. Ben urged the squad forward, motivating them to confront the orcs, and Hans agreed, covering them with his bow from a hillside. He fired at the orc warrior, aiming for the head, but the arrow bounced harmlessly off the helmet. The squad considered retreating to regroup, but Hans made a daring move to strike the orc warrior, which cost him his proficient hand. He now faced certain doom, at the mercy of the massive enemy. Hyanu, sensing the danger, rushed in from behind, calling out to Hans and hoping to save him. In moments, they found themselves completely surrounded by orcs, the battlefield tense and chaotic. Hans was badly wounded, but thanks to the soldiers, he was safe. Hyanu had tried everything he could, yet the orc warrior's armor was impenetrable. Realizing that continuing the fight would only increase casualties, he immediately ordered the soldiers to form a defensive position and retreat to the forest behind them. "I'll follow right after," he assured them. Ben echoed the command to the soldiers, emphasizing that getting their captain to safety was the priority. The soldiers ran into the forest, though Ben warned Hyanu that they wouldn't be able to move very fast among the trees. "This will only buy us some time," Ben admitted. Hyanu quickly calculated that all he needed was 5 minutes. He asked Ben if he and the soldiers could hold out that long, and Ben, bloodied but determined, nodded. Hyanu analyzed the orc warrior's armor carefully. Arrows alone wouldn't pierce it. He equipped Deng's hammer, an epic item that dramatically reduced crafting time. While Ben and the remaining soldiers battled the orcs, Hyanu got to work. Exhausted as they were, Ben and the squad focused on holding the line, knowing Hyanu only needed a short window. Just as Ben found himself face-to-face with the towering orc warrior, ready to be struck down, a powerful projectile streaked through the air. It shattered the orc warrior's armor and cleanly passed through his body, sending blood spraying in every direction. Ben spun around, stunned, to see Hyanu standing at a distance, a swirling aura of immense power radiating around him. Hyanu fired again. This time, the projectile smashed into the orc warrior's head, sending him crashing to the ground. Ben's jaw nearly dropped when he noticed the enhancement Hyanu had equipped on his bow. The Swift Arrow, a short but supersonic projectile capable of 70% penetration and 60% increased speed, able to shatter stone. Ingeniously, Hyanu had constructed it himself using bamboo. The soldiers, seeing the orc warrior rise once more, found renewed strength. Hyanu remained calm, drawing on his confidence and precision. His arrows now carried the destructive force of a musket, and with another round, he cut clean through the orc warrior's neck, finally defeating it. The system lit up with notifications. Hyanu had defeated the orc warrior, gained massive experience, and received the title Orc Slayer, boosting his attack power against orcs by 15% and instilling fear in them. Another orc warrior, sensing the terrifying power that had just slain his comrade, dropped his weapon and fled. Hyanu wasn't about to let him escape. Running down the fleeing orc, he looked like a devil incarnate. A single deadly arrow struck, decapitating the orc instantly. Hyanu now stood amid a pile of orc bodies, the quest to subjugate the invading army complete. His contribution rate reached 92%, and the system confirmed he had cleared the mission with astonishing results. The soldiers erupted into a victorious roar, cheering for Hyanu. The system informed him that the subjugation unit now completely trusted his command, granting him a special effect that added 10 charisma points. Ben helped Hans to his feet and carried him over to Hyanu. Hans, in awe, thanked him from the bottom of his heart. He struck his chest with his severed hand as a mark of respect, and the other soldiers followed suit, honoring the man who had turned the tide of battle. Hyanu returned the gesture, placing his hand over his chest as he thanked the soldiers. With that, his trial was complete. He exhaled deeply, a sense of relief washing over him as he gazed at the sunset, preparing to finally return to the blacksmith's tower. Yet the question remained, how is he going to get back? Meanwhile, the Council of Blacksmiths, led by Deng, had been searching for a worthy blacksmith to wield the powerful sword they safeguarded. They could not simply give it to anyone, as most blacksmiths now sought profit over perfection. But the prophecy spoke of a successor to the god of blacksmiths, one who would restore prosperity to the clan. Deng now believed he had found that person, and he summoned the other blacksmith lords to the central tower. Carlson, the tower lord of the Bao blacksmiths, disagreed with Deng's choice to give the sword to an outsider. Deng calmly replied that Hyanu had already passed the conditions set for the sword. Despite not having selected a profession, Hyanu had led soldiers and, using his blacksmith skills, had annihilated the orc army. The other lords were stunned. How could someone without a class accomplish such a feat? Deng explained that the prophecy predicted a successor stronger than anyone else and believed that the sword would provide the final confirmation. Just then, a butler announced Hyanu's arrival, and Deng ordered him to be brought in. Hyanu pushed open the door, and Deng declared that he had passed the test, earning the right to enter the blacksmith sanctuary and to challenge the sword of prophecy left behind by the god of blacksmiths. Deng promised that once Hyanu grasped the sword, its truth would be revealed, along with a great reward. Hyanu wondered if the reward might be a legendary class, especially after completing an SS rank quest. One of the lords commended him for crafting the swift arrows during the orc battle, though he dismissed them as mere imitations and credited Hyanu's initial epic bow for his survival. Most lords remained skeptical, insisting that Hyanu draw the sword so they could see whether he was truly capable or a fraud. Hyanu recognized the lords as masters of the blacksmith tower, each having forged the legendary weapons of Ares. These were high-tier NPCs with impressive titles and levels. Coulson alone was a level 365 blacksmith. Despite their reputations, Hyanu did not feel inferior. He wondered what would happen if they competed without relying on titles. He stepped forward and approached the sword. The moment he touched it, an overwhelming aura erupted, shocking everyone in the hall. The sword transformed into blinding light and entered Hyanu's body. Confused, he wondered where it had gone. Deng, however, already knew it was confirmation that the prophecy was being fulfilled. Bursting into laughter, he exclaimed that all the rituals and procedures they had been performing were meaningless compared to the real successor appearing. Coulson was furious, refusing to accept that Hyanu, a mere foreigner, might be the prophesied successor. Meanwhile, the system congratulated Hyanu, declaring him the game's first god class. Instantly, he was promoted to the god of blacksmiths, even as a level 10 player, becoming the first ever to hold the class. Deng, behind him, was ecstatic that Hyanu had achieved this milestone. Along with the class, Hyanu received an SSS-ranked title, God of Blacksmiths. The title allowed him to bypass material level restrictions in crafting, and his mastery of artifacts increased depending on the materials used, making him stronger than any other blacksmith. The system notified him that the sword trial would begin once he reached level 100. As the other lords started to accept the decision, Coulson screamed in outrage, refusing to acknowledge Hyanu. He argued that the successor should be determined by the lord's consensus, not the sword's choice. Deng reminded him that the prophecy was absolute. Seizing a loophole in the prophecy, Coulson challenged Hyanu to a blacksmith duel, insisting that he would recognize Hyanu as the true successor only if he won. However, Hyanu knew that if he lost, he would be forced to forfeit the god of blacksmith's title. Deng grew concerned and urgently told his fellow lords that they needed to restrain Coulson, but to his shock, none of them moved an inch. Coulson then turned to Hyanu, smirking, and offered him a way out, withdraw from the duel, and he would be granted the position of Vice Tower Lord. Coulson believed Hyanu would back down, but unbeknownst to him, Hyanu had secretly been hoping for this challenge. Without hesitation, he accepted. A blacksmith's duty, after all, spoke through their skill. The system instantly generated the quest, a duel against Coulson. Coulson explained the rules, letting Hyanu know that a blacksmith duel was unlike that of knights. The swords they forged in the smithy would determine the outcome. Once crafted, they would strike their swords against each other. Whichever broke first would lose. Coulson pointed out a high-grade smithy prepared inside the hall and laughed, claiming that Hyanu could only forge a proper sword in a single day if he truly was the god of blacksmiths. With the challenge set, Coulson departed, promising to meet him the next day. After Coulson left, Deng voiced his concern. Hyanu had accepted the duel without hesitation, and Deng reminded the lords that Coulson was an exceptional blacksmith, even among tower masters. Hyanu still needed time to grow, despite possessing the god class skill. Hyanu reflected that, without changing to god class, he would have been doomed to lose. He knew Coulson had formidable abilities, but the god class skill had leveled the playing field, reducing the duel to pure craftsmanship. Hyanu now wielded his new skill, God's custom-made creation. This skill allowed him to craft any artifact he desired and imbue it with any effect he wished. The higher the effect's grade, the more difficult the crafting, but the effect's value would be granted at 100% if his technique was precise. Meanwhile, Coulson entered his smithy, confident. He considered himself chosen, having inherited his blacksmithing skill from his father. Yet after encountering a master surpassing him, he gave up forging swords and became the tower master of the Bao blacksmiths. Though he had accepted reality, he could never accept that an outsider might now become his superior. Fueled by rage and determination, Coulson hammered away at his steel with precision and power. At the same time, Hyanu labored on his sword. He knew that imbuing artifacts with abilities operated under a principle. Gaining one thing often meant losing another. Deng observed that Hyanu would need to maximize the sword's strength to gain any advantage in the duel. Typically, tower gods forged at the highest possible grade, but Hyanu's strength and stats were merely rare grade. Deng wondered how Hyanu planned to overcome this as he crafted late into the night. Finally, the long-awaited hour arrived. The duel hall was packed with tower lords and spectators. Coulson laughed at Hyanu, remarking on his overnight preparation and boasting that he would see if Hyanu's skill matched someone worthy of being the god's successor. Hyanu remained silent. Coulson drew a breathtaking sword from its sheath, Black Knight. Its durability reached 12,000 points, and it possessed a passive skill, Weapon Breaker. Deng wasn't surprised Coulson's talent was undeniable. The other lords could see the perfection in Coulson's work, a sword imbued with family tradition and secret techniques. Coulson smiled, confident that Hyanu was doomed. Finally, Hyanu drew his sword. To everyone's astonishment, it appeared as nothing more than a rare sword with just 1,000 durability points. Shock and disappointment rippled through the lords. Coulson's smug grin widened, certain he would crush Hyanu and claim victory. The duel began. Coulson charged with lethal intent, while Hyanu assumed a defensive stance, waiting patiently. Their swords clashed with a resounding impact, and in a shocking instant, one of the swords shattered completely. The lords froze in shock as they witnessed the impossible. Coulson's sword lay shattered on the ground. Coulson himself could not believe his eyes. Staring at the broken blade, he was forced to ask Hyanu how he had achieved such a feat. Hyanu calmly explained that a sword cannot be judged by its grade alone. His sword carried an active skill that prevented it from being broken unless its durability reached 0. The single strike they exchanged had only reduced its durability by 100 points. Hearing this, Coulson remembered what his father once told him, that one day, the god of blacksmiths would appear someone who would reshape the way they thought and perceived blacksmithing. His father had promised that everyone would have a chance to witness this master's work. Coulson had been eager to meet the gods of blacksmiths, and now, standing before Hyanu, he realized the truth of those words. Hyanu revealed that breaking Coulson's sword alone would not have been enough to convince the tower masters. That was why he had deliberately crafted a sword capable of cutting other swords, a feat dependent entirely on skill and the sweat of a blacksmith. Deng, who had been skeptical of Hyanu's bold approach, now realized that Hyanu truly defied conventional logic. Coulson, utterly defeated, finally spoke. With tears in his eyes, he asked Hyanu if he, too, could ever craft a sword capable of cutting other swords. Hyanu smiled and replied, "There is nothing called impossible." Overcome, Coulson fell to his knees and pledged his loyalty to Hyanu. With this, Hyanu completed the blacksmith duel quest. Following the duel, Hyanu was celebrated and rewarded like the true prodigy he was. First came 500 gold coins, which lifted his spirits immensely. Alongside the gold, he received a scroll containing the legendary bow recipe, one of the 10 treasures of the blacksmith's tower. Coulson admitted he had never completed the recipe himself, believing it was right to pass it to someone destined for great power. Deng assured Hyanu that the lords would now dedicate themselves to his new vision, urging him to stand at the pinnacle of blacksmithing power. Logging out of the game, Hyanu met with his friend Jian, who was amazed at how skilled he had become. "All that suffering at the forge is finally paying off," Jian said. Curious, Jian asked about the perks of being a god-class player. Hyanu replied that they were subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He then reminded Jian that he still needed to pay his father's hospital bill the next day, a shocking increase of 10 million won. Jian had researched the new medicine Hyanu wanted, revealing that the total cost would be 20 million won, and insurance would not cover it. Jian explained the limits. Hyanu's stamina would restrict the number of artifacts he could craft and sell. "You need to level up and gain more fame," Jian advised. "Become friends with the most famous players in the game. This is the only way to obtain higher-grade rewards and rare items. Use this as a foundation to craft the best artifacts." Jian assured Hyanu that he had a plan to help him achieve this. Meanwhile, on the game's group chat, players discussed a recent event. A player named Lord had been promoted to legendary class by defeating the Sword King Bar. However, he had only landed a single hit a feat no one else had accomplished. This sparked curiosity and awe across the community. The next day, Hyanu still faced the daunting task of paying his father's bills. Even his God-class earnings weren't enough, until the system notified him that his first custom-made sword had sold for 53,000 gold coins to Lord. The timing was perfect. Hyanu rushed to the hospital and informed the attendant that he could now settle his father's bills, due that very day. Thanks to this clutch sale, he realized that Ares, his sword, was truly his saving grace. There was no way he could stop playing the game now. Shortly after, Lord sent him a message. Thanks to Hyanu's sword, he had passed Barrett's test. Lord claimed that the 50 million won he paid for the sword was worth every coin, as it had allowed him to create a crucial opening that even Barrett, king of the Goyard kingdom, had not expected. Lord stressed that Hyanu must meet Barrett to craft a sword for him. Hyanu was stunned. Stepping outside the hospital, he realized he finally had the power to resolve all his problems. His father's treatment, the expensive medicine, and his hospital bills. All that remained was to meet Barrett and locate the lost forge. Later, when he tried to reach out to Barrett, he hit a brick wall. The system informed him that he could not meet Barrett yet. His level and fame were still too low. He would need to grow stronger before being granted an audience. Hyanu nearly faints when he learns the shocking requirement. He needs to be at least level 200 before he can meet Barrett. Panicked, he immediately asks if there's any other way to get an audience with Bar. That's when Giant explains the Goyard martial arts tournament. Held every year in the Goyard kingdom, it's designed to scout promising warriors, and Barrett is always present. Only players between level 50 and 60 can participate, making it the perfect opportunity for Hyanu, given his current trash level. The winner receives their prize money directly from Barrett himself, providing Hyanu the only viable path to meet the legendary king. With his next objective clear, Deng instructs Hyanu to head to the castle territory, located at the border between Prime and Goyard, a region plagued by constant undead invasions. Deng believes Hyanu's skills will be needed there, and he notes that this area offers the fastest way to level up. Fired up with determination, Hyanu sets off for castle territory, resolved to complete the quest no matter the challenge. Upon arrival, he meets Lander, a level 26 warrior who explains that reinforcements are desperately needed. The undead have increased in numbers, and the defenders are struggling. Hyanu asks why this is happening, and Lander explains that the invading army has always been held at bay by the Holy Bell of Ramos, which rang periodically to keep the undead in check. Recently, however, the bell shattered into pieces. With no system to hold them back, the undead began amassing in large numbers. Hyanu inquires if the bell can be repaired. Lander's eyes widen as he realizes Hyanu is from Deng, the blacksmith of the sword tower. Hyanu confirms it, and Lander becomes serious. "We've been waiting for you. Follow me. We need to meet the commander." Moments later, they arrive before Commander Cal, who greets Hyanu respectfully. When Hyanu explains his plan to repair the Holy Bell of Ramos, Cal shakes his head. The bell is basically unrepairable, he says. Countless attempts have failed. Even the smith remaining in the castle, already level 290, has been unable to restore it. Cal considers the efforts a waste of time. Hyanu quietly reveals that he is only level 13, leaving Cal and his subordinates in shock. Cal humbly advises him to find someone closer to his level to help, as the territory teeters on the brink of destruction. Just as Cal is explaining the urgency, a soldier runs in with alarming news. The undead are breaching the eastern wall, a horde of ghouls swarming into the castle. Cal orders his forces to defend the main gate and calls Lander to follow him, leaving Hyanu with strict instructions that everything he has seen is a secret. Assessing the chaos, Hyanu realizes that he might be able to tackle this quest as he did with the orcs. The quest officially opens: defeat the invading ghouls and protect the castle gate. The undead have begun climbing the walls in huge numbers, and Hyanu jumps into the fight, drawing his bow and taking aim. Lander warns him, "These undead are tough. Without a weapon imbued with holy power, you'll need to hit the same spot multiple times to kill them effectively." Hyanu proves him wrong in a single shot. A ghoul's head explodes under the arrow's force, and Lander stares in disbelief. There is no holy power in Hyanu's weapon, yet he continues firing relentlessly. Each arrow decimates the undead, breaking their formations and pushing them back. The soldiers gain precious breathing room and begin cheering, their morale skyrocketing. Even Lander is exhilarated, shouting confidently, "The undead are finished." Hyanu exhales, a smile of relief on his face. Things are going much smoother than he anticipated. Suddenly, chaos erupts. A giant siege ghoul emerges, and the system instantly assigns Hyanu a new task: defeat the terrifying monster. With just one step, the colossal ghoul crushes a group of soldiers, its sheer size dwarfing the castle walls. Screams of terror fill the air as the defenders realize that Commander Cal might be their only hope. But Cal is tied down defending the main gate. There's no one to spare. Lander's eyes widen as he watches the walls tremble under the ghoul's weight. Hyana steps forward calmly. "I'll draw its attention," he declares. Lander protests, asking how he plans to do it alone. But Hyana leaps from the wall, switching from his bow to his sword midair. He lands before the ghoul, ready to face it head-on. The massive creature roars and gives chase, exactly as Hyanu intended. The ghoul is faster than anticipated, forcing Hyanu into a dangerous dance for survival. When it towers directly over him, Hyanu fires his bow with deadly precision, but the arrow, despite its blinding speed and destructive force, barely scratches the monster. In a surge of rage, the ghoul kicks him, dropping his HP below 10%. Hyanu crashes to the ground, and the system warns him. If his HP hits 0%, he will be automatically logged out. He grits his teeth. He refuses to be defeated this way not when so much is on the line. If he dies now, he loses his chance at the Goyard martial arts tournament. His father's hospital bills go unpaid, and his plan to reclaim the blacksmith shop collapses. Summoning every ounce of courage, he rises again, firing arrows at the ghoul's legs. The monster screams in pain, enraged, and lunges at him. Hyanu's HP drops below 3%, and just as he pulls back his bow for a final shot, the string snaps, leaving him vulnerable. The ghoul strikes, slamming him to the ground and leaving him at 1% HP. Suddenly, Hyanu finds himself in a strange, ethereal space, the shadow of defeat looming over him. Yet, he refuses to give up. He raises his hand, desperate for any chance. The system intervenes. A new skill awakens: God's emergency crafting. The conditions are strict. Craft a weapon within 20 seconds, and it can only be used for 30 seconds. Hyanu seizes the opportunity, grabbing his hammer and materials. Time ticks down as he pounds steel with intense focus. Just before the clock runs out, the weapon is complete. Hyanu returns to the battlefield, wielding his freshly forged weapon. With one devastating strike, he cleaves through the giant ghoul, sending it crashing to the ground. Exhausted, he drops to his knees, overwhelmed by the impossibility he just achieved. The system confirms his victory. Ghoul defeated, massive experience gained. Before he can celebrate, darkness overtakes him. Lander rushes to his side, calling his name frantically. The next morning, Hyanu awakens and asks how much time has passed. Soldiers erupt into cheers, calling him a hero. Confused, he listens as Cal arrives, explaining that their survival is entirely thanks to him. Though Hyanu struggles to explain how he did it crafting a divine weapon mid-battle, a feat no one would believe, Cal reassures him. There's no need for modesty. The sword he forged contained holy power, capable of vanquishing spirits and ghouls alike, echoing his father's teachings. Cal hands him a reward, 2,000 gold coins. Hyanu is blown away but gratefully accepts. Then, in an unexpected gesture, Cal bows to him, shocking everyone present. Hyanu quickly reassures him there's no need for apologies, and the two shake hands, moving the soldiers to tears. This interaction maxes out Cal's affinity for Hyanu. Cal then makes a formal request: repair the Bell of Ramos. He sensed divine power in the weapon Hyanu used, and is confident he can restore the bell. Hyanu, however, explains he must hurry to the Goyard Kingdom. That's when Cal reveals a critical clue. Lord possesses a legendary mineral that might help repair the bell. Hyanu's interest spikes as Cal leads him to the bell's shattered fragments. Hyanu freezes. The bell is not cracked, it is completely destroyed. Cal looks at him expectantly, like a loyal puppy, asking if he can repair it. Nervously, Hyanu says yes, though deep down he fears the challenge ahead. Before he can process this, a woman appears, glaring at him.